A mother's love is supposed to be the safest place in the world. But what happens when that love is one-sided? When no matter how hard you fight, how much you achieve, or how desperately you try to prove your worth, someone else always comes first. For Judge Simone Caldwell, the answer came in the form of 21 gunshots. A twin sister sobbing, begging for her life. A mother frozen in shock, watching as the daughter she cherished most collapsed in a pool of blood. And another daughter, the forgotten one, finally taking control in the most violent way possible. Simone had spent her entire life chasing something she was never meant to catch, her mother's love. No matter how much she accomplished, it was never enough. Sienna was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. And for years, Simone watched from the sidelines, hoping that one day, she would finally be seen. That day never came. Until she decided to make it happen. She spent weeks planning the perfect birthday surprise for their mother, something personal, something meaningful, something that would prove she was just as worthy of love. She couldn't be there in person, so she entrusted Sienna to carry out the final details. But instead of honoring her sister's effort, Sienna stole it. She took the credit. She basked in the love, the gratitude, the praise, every single thing Simone had fought so hard to earn. And when Simone realized the truth, she didn't break down. She didn't argue. She simply pulled the trigger. Welcome to Everyday True Crime, where we unravel the darkest, most chilling cases of betrayal, revenge, and the unthinkable crimes that shock the world. This is the story of a woman who spent her life enforcing justice, until the day she took it into her own hands. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us until the end, because this case will leave you questioning just how far someone will go when love is never enough. Simone and Sienna Caldwell may have shared the same face, but their lives were written in two entirely different scripts. Simone was the disciplined one, the overachiever, the perfectionist, the daughter who never made mistakes. She spent her childhood buried in textbooks, determined to make something of herself. Every goal she set, she conquered. Every challenge, she crushed. She graduated top of her class, soared through law school, and made history as the youngest judge in Texas. In the courtroom, she was powerful. Respected. Feared. But at home, she was invisible. Because then there was Sienna, the golden child. Sienna never had to try too hard. She was effortlessly charming, a natural-born favorite. Where Simone worked, Sienna simply existed. And somehow, just existing was enough. She was fun, carefree, and reckless in a way that never had consequences. If Simone was the storm, Sienna was the sunshine, always dazzling, always adored, always standing in the light while Simone was left in the shadows. Their mother, Eleanor Caldwell, never even tried to hide her favoritism. Sienna could do no wrong. If she failed, it was excused. If she succeeded, it was celebrated. And Simone? No matter how many trophies, degrees, or titles she collected, it was never enough. The love she so desperately craved never stretched far enough to reach her. It wasn't just childhood jealousy. It was a lifetime of being second best. 1,000 tiny wounds, ignored and dismissed, until they became scars. Simone spent years swallowing the pain, telling herself it didn't matter. Until one day, it did. Because for the first time, she had a plan, something that would finally make her mother see her. Something that would force Eleanor to acknowledge her, to love her, to be proud of her. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph. But in the end, it was just the final betrayal. Eleanor Caldwell's birthday was coming up, and Simone had already decided, this year would be different. This year, she wouldn't sit in silence as her mother fawned over Sienna's effortless charm, dismissing Simone's achievements like they were expected, like they didn't matter. This year, she would prove that she was just as capable of giving love, of deserving love, of being seen. It had to be perfect. Simone poured herself into every detail. This wasn't just about throwing a party, it was about creating something meaningful, something personal. Something that would remind Eleanor of all the little things Simone had always remembered. The moments, the memories, the unspoken details that Sienna had never cared about. She chose an intimate, elegant setting, nothing too grand, nothing too flashy. Just beautiful. A place that felt warm and familiar, the kind of place their mother would feel at home in. The decorations were soft and understated, a color scheme inspired by an old photograph of Eleanor as a young woman. Every flower, every candle, every carefully placed accent carried meaning, even if her mother would never know it. The gifts were even more deliberate. A first edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God, Eleanor's favorite novel, the one she had read so many times the pages were frayed at the edges. A bracelet engraved with a phrase from an old lullaby Eleanor used to hum when they were children, back when Simone still believed her mother's love was unconditional. And then there was the video. It took weeks to put together. She sifted through hours of old footage, piecing together moments that mattered, the times when Eleanor had smiled the brightest, laughed the hardest, held her daughters the closest. She wanted her mother to see the love woven into those memories, to remember that she had been the one to put them together. That she had been the one who cared enough to notice. Simone wasn't doing this for praise. She just wanted acknowledgement. Just once. She wanted her mother to look at her the way she looked at Sienna. But there was a problem. She couldn't be there in person. Her work as a judge made it impossible to step away. And even though that stung, missing the moment she had worked so hard to create, she had a solution. A simple one. Sienna. She called her sister a week before the party, laying it all out. I need you to make sure everything gets there. The decorations, the video, the gifts, everything's already paid for. You don't have to do anything but make sure it's set up right. Sienna had giggled, teasing her. Look at you, all sentimental. Who knew the Ice Queen had a soft spot? Simone ignored the jab. She was used to it. Sienna had been calling her cold since they were kids, since their mother started treating Simone's ambition like it was something rigid and unnatural while Sienna's charm was effortless, warm, lovable. Just make sure she sees it, Simone said, voice tight. Make sure she knows I did this for her. Sienna sighed dramatically. Relax, sis. I got it. And that was it. Simone trusted her. For once, she believed Sienna wouldn't let her down. The night of the party, Simone sat alone in her office, checking her phone every few minutes, waiting for the call, the message, anything. Waiting for her mother to finally say it. She waited for the call. The text. The acknowledgement. She checked her phone obsessively, expecting to see her mother's name pop up with words she had been aching to hear her entire life. Simone, this was beautiful. You did this for me. I can't believe how thoughtful you are. But the call never came. The text never came. Instead, she got silence. Days passed, and the weight of that silence grew heavier. Doubt crept in. Had her mother not liked the surprise? Had something gone wrong? Had Sienna even followed through? The uncertainty gnawed at her, restless and relentless. So she caved. She called her mother, forcing a casual tone. Hey, Mom. I just wanted to check in. How was your birthday? Eleanor's voice was warm, happy. Oh, it was wonderful, baby. Sienna is the most thoughtful daughter a mother could ask for. She put together the most beautiful surprise. Simone felt the words like a slap to the face. Her breath caught in her throat. Her grip tightened around the phone. Sienna, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, darling. She made everything so personal. The video, the decorations, the gifts, she knows me so well. She always makes me feel so special. Simone's stomach twisted. Her mother kept gushing, oblivious to the rage building on the other end of the call. Sienna had done it. She had stolen it. Taken every ounce of effort Simone had poured into that night and made it hers. And their mother had believed it, without hesitation. Of course she had. Because it was Sienna. Because it had always been Sienna. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. Simone felt sick. She couldn't listen to another word. "I have to go," she muttered, hanging up before her mother could respond. Her mind was a blur of anger, betrayal, and something deeper. Something darker. Simone didn't remember grabbing the gun. She didn't remember storming out of her house, her heart beat a deafening roar in her ears. All she knew was the fire in her veins, the raw, seething rage clawing at her chest. Her hands trembled around the grip of the pistol. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Sienna is the most thoughtful daughter a mother could ask for." The words wouldn't stop. They played over and over, each syllable slicing deeper than the last. Her mother had always chosen Sienna. And now Sienna had stolen her moment, stolen the one chance Simone had to prove she was worthy of love. The betrayal festered like an open wound. She barely noticed the traffic lights. She barely noticed the road. All she saw was Sienna's face. Smug. Mocking. Laughing. By the time she pulled up to Sienna's house, her grip on reality was as fragile as the shaking breath she took before stepping out of the car. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. And then she saw them. Through the living room window. Sienna and their mother. Talking. Laughing. Reminiscing about the party. A party she had planned. And yet Sienna was still the center of attention. The rage that had been simmering inside Simone for years finally erupted. She shoved the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Eleanor jumped, startled, but Sienna only smirked. "Well, well," she said, lounging back on the couch. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Simone barely heard her. Her eyes locked onto her mother's. "You're here." Simone's voice was unsteady, disbelief laced in every word. Her mother frowned. "Of course I'm here. Sienna planned the most beautiful party for me." "Sienna didn't do anything." Simone's voice cracked, a bitter mixture of heartbreak and fury. Eleanor's face twisted in confusion. "Simone, what are you talking about?" Simone turned to Sienna, her entire body shaking. "Tell her." Sienna's smirk widened. "Tell her what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Tell her you lied." Simone screamed. Eleanor stiffened. Her gaze darted between her daughters. "Sienna," she said hesitantly. "Tell her who really planned the party," Simone demanded, stepping closer. Sienna tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Simone, I don't know what fantasy you've created in your head, but I planned that party. I made it special. I made her happy. You're just mad because she loves me more than she loves you." Simone's vision blurred. "I trusted you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "That was your first mistake," Sienna shot back. "Just admit it," Simone begged. "Admit that you took credit for something you didn't do. Just once, Sienna. Just once, tell the truth." Eleanor was watching the exchange, growing more confused by the second. "Sienna," she pressed again. "What is she talking about?" Sienna shrugged. "She's trying to take credit for my party, Mom. Like she always does. Trying to play the victim, trying to be the perfect daughter when we all know she's not." Eleanor sighed. "Simone, I don't have time for this. I don't know why you're acting like this, but this is exactly why you and I can never get along. You just can't stand that Sienna is better than you." Something inside Simone cracked. It felt like her entire world collapsed in on itself, the pain suffocating, unbearable. "She's lying," she screamed. Sienna stood up slowly, her smirk widening. Face it, Simone, she said softly. You will never be enough. The gun was in Simone's hand before she even realized it. Her grip was firm. Steady. Sienna's eyes widened, but only for a second. Then she laughed. You're not gonna shoot me. Simone pulled the trigger. The first shot hit Sienna square in the chest. She stumbled back, shock flashing across her face. Eleanor screamed. Simone didn't stop. She fired again. And again. And again. Sienna's body jerked with every bullet, but Simone's hands didn't waver. The betrayal. The years of pain. The countless nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering why she wasn't enough. She let it all pour out. Through her rage. Through her grief. Through 21 bullets. Eleanor collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Simone, stop. Please. Please. But Simone didn't hear her. Didn't see her. By the time the gun clicked empty, Sienna was nothing but a lifeless, mangled body on the floor. The room was silent. Eleanor rocked back and forth, hands covering her face, whispering prayers that would never be answered. Simone stared down at her sister, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Sienna had taken everything from her. Her childhood. Her dignity. Her mother's love. But not anymore. Now, for the first time in her life. Simone had taken something from her. Eleanor Caldwell could barely breathe. Her hands trembled as she pressed the numbers on her phone, her fingers slipping against the blood that had splattered onto her skin. 911, what's your emergency? She tried to speak, but the words got caught in her throat. Sienna's lifeless body was sprawled across the living room floor, 21 bullet wounds tearing through the silk fabric of her dress. Her beautiful, perfect daughter, gone. The metallic scent of blood filled the air, thick and suffocating. And standing over the body, gun still in her hand, was Simone. Her expression was unreadable. Not anger. Not sorrow. Just empty. Eleanor's sobs were uncontrollable as she finally choked out the words. My daughter has been shot, my daughter is dead. Ma'am, who shot her? Her lips quivered. She turned, looking at Simone. Her other daughter. Her firstborn. Her murderer. My daughter, Eleanor whispered. My daughter did it. The sound of sirens split through the night air. Flashes of red and blue flickered through the windows, bouncing off the blood-streaked walls. Simone didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't run. She stood there, frozen, as the door burst open and police officers swarmed inside. Guns were drawn. Voices shouted. Drop the weapon. Hands in the air. Slowly, almost methodically, Simone lifted the gun. For a second, the officers tensed, fingers hovering over their triggers. But then. She turned the handle toward them. Held it out, surrendering without a fight. She said nothing. Did nothing. Just let them take the gun from her hands, let them force her arms behind her back, let them clamp the cold steel cuffs around her wrists. The weight of her actions finally settled onto her shoulders. Simone Caldwell, esteemed judge, upholder of the law, was now on the other side of it. The media swarmed the case like vultures. A respected Texas judge, known for her strict sentences and unwavering belief in justice, had brutally executed her twin sister in cold blood. The headlines were merciless. Judge turned killer, twisted family drama ends in bloodshed. Sibling rivalry to murder, how Simone Caldwell snapped. From the bench to a jail cell, the fall of a legal icon. Cameras flashed as Simone was led into the courthouse, chains around her wrists and ankles, an orange jumpsuit replacing the designer suits she had once worn inside those very halls. She had sentenced criminals here. Now, she was the criminal. Eleanor sat in the courtroom, her face pale, her hands gripping a tissue so tightly it nearly tore apart. She couldn't believe it. She had lost both daughters in one night, one to death, the other to murder. And deep down, in the darkest part of her heart, she couldn't shake the guilt. Had she done this? Had her love, or lack thereof, been the reason for the blood on that floor? Simone never looked at her. She stared straight ahead, her face unreadable as the trial began. The defense fought hard. They painted a picture of a woman who had spent her life being emotionally tormented, always second best to a sister who manipulated and took everything from her. They argued that Simone had been pushed beyond her limits, that years of psychological abuse had driven her to a breaking point. This wasn't just about a birthday party, her attorney told the jury. This was a lifetime of pain, of being unseen, unheard, unloved. Sienna stole more than a party, she stole Simone's sense of worth. That night, Simone didn't see a sister. She saw the sum of every betrayal, every heartbreak, every moment of being less than. And she snapped. The prosecution was cold and unrelenting. This was not self-defense. This was not a crime of passion. This was an execution. They showed the crime scene photos. The bullet wounds. The sheer brutality of it. 21 shots, ladies and gentlemen. 21. Simone Caldwell didn't just want her sister dead, she wanted her erased. The courtroom was silent as the jury weighed the evidence. The choice was not an easy one. Simone was no stranger to justice. She had spent years delivering it. Now, she waited to see how it would be delivered to her. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent as the jury filed back in. Simone sat motionless, her face unreadable, but her heart pounded in her chest. She had spent years watching verdicts being handed down. Now, she was waiting for her own. Has the jury reached a decision? The judge asked. A juror stood. We have, Your Honor. Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair, her nails digging into the wood. The entire room held its breath. We, the jury, find the defendant, Simone Caldwell. A pause. A lifetime in a second. Guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Simone didn't react. No tears. No protests. She only closed her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again, staring straight ahead as if she had expected this all along. Eleanor let out a strangled sob. Her baby was gone. Both of them were. The sentence was swift. Life in prison. No possibility of parole. A woman who had once stood behind the judge's bench was now escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, sentenced by the very system she had served. There were no goodbyes. No last words exchanged. Just the sound of the chains rattling as she was led away. Some believed justice had been served. Others questioned if justice had ever truly existed in this case. Was Simone Caldwell a cold-blooded murderer? Or was she a woman who had simply reached her breaking point? It didn't matter now. Sienna Caldwell was dead. Simone Caldwell would never be free again. And Eleanor Caldwell? She was left with nothing but memories. And the unbearable silence of an empty home. Favoritism can be deadly. For years, Simone Caldwell had played by the rules, hoping one day, she'd finally win the love she deserved. But when she realized she would never be enough, she stopped waiting for justice. And took matters into her own hands. If this case shocked you, there's plenty more where.